Hey everybody, there's been a huge amount of information out there regarding the budget that happened on the 12th of May at 7:30 p.m, delivered by Jim Chalmers, Labor budget. Obviously lots of changes that he spoke about in the budget speech, and I've done so many podcasts over the last couple of days and wanted to share with you guys on what school should have taught you. Just a recent one that I did on a live YouTube podcast with Pizza and Property and some other great professionals as well. But it's really good. It really nails in what are the changes and what are the things that you need to look at. Also, more importantly, for everybody that's out there, the budget speech is a speech. What generally happens after the budget is it will go through its consultation period where there'll be lots of different professionals and industry bodies that get involved just to really sit down with the Treasurer and actually go through the budget notes. What is it actually going to look like? What is the legislation? How do we draft the legislation? Once that's gone through its consultation period, it will then generally go through the legislation being drafted. It will generally go through the lower house first, then up to the Senate to be debated. Now, generally with major and large tax reforms like we've seen in this budget, tends to go through maybe some compromise, maybe some amendments, goes back up to the House, upper house, back down to the lower house before things become legislated and enacted in tax law. So biggest advice is don't stress. There's been lots of things that will come out regarding the budget over the next couple of weeks. You've got to keep your eyes and ears tuned to the telly. If you listen to podcasts, YouTube channels, watch them, gather as much thoughts as you can. But this is a bit of an uncertain time where very hard to create a strategy when we don't have the legislation just yet. So I hope you like this podcast that we've done, talking about the budget and some of the changes. Keep your eyes on my YouTube channel and iTunes and Spotify. I'll be releasing lots of videos as things progress about what things you need to be considering, structures you need to be considering to all help you make those great decisions from a tax perspective.
Everything school should have taught you in one place. With a property portfolio of over 17 million and an accountancy firm of over 16,000 clients, as well as being an accountant to some of the wealthiest people in Australia, Jeremy Iannuzzelli will be sharing his lessons on everything school should have taught you so you can build the life you want.
All right, guys, now we should be live across YouTube and Facebook. Simon Loo, Jeremy Iannuzzelli, Morgan Bushell. It's time to talk budgets. There's been some very big changes that have happened in the last 24 hours. CGT changes, negative gearing changes. Some of them are potentially not even going to fully take effect the way that everyone's already been talking around the water cooler. Jeremy, you and I were just talking about this beforehand. There's going to be some big borrowing changes as well. Morgan, you and I were talking like late last night. And Simon, you and I were chatting a little bit more about what potential effects this is going to have on the market. Now, we've got so many questions that you guys have already sent in, ready to fire at Morgan, Jeremy, and Simon. We literally had hundreds. So some of them we had to kind of smush down together. Otherwise, we'd probably be here till next year's budget as well, still answering questions. But then we've also got a few as well that are going to come through from the live stream. So whether you're watching on Facebook, whether you're watching on YouTube, if you've got a question, we can chuck it on here and ask straight away. Get as interactive as possible. The only silly one is the one that you want to ask and you don't. But otherwise, gentlemen, welcome Morgan, Jeremy, and Simon. How you guys going?
Good, mate. How are you?
Are you all typing your response there, or?
A little bit over it, to be honest, man. It's just been, I mean, we've been talking about the budget. Not for this one. But we've been, honestly, this whole budget thing has been on the cards for weeks. And, you know, like there's been leaks every other day about what's going to happen and changes and this and that. And then obviously the big thing dropped yesterday. Really no surprises, if I'm honest. You know, we can't expect it. The only surprise I would say is the whole negative gearing still applies until July 2027, which I think is going to incentivize a lot of short-term flippers.
So is that, you mean the CGT side of things, Simon, that's still going to 2027?
That and also negative gearing. So I think, you know, the first thing that I thought of is a lot of people are going to be looking for opportunities now to try and flip before July 1, 2027. They might run up some costs, maybe stick a tenant in, you know, so that the renos or whatever cost they have accrued over this period is going to be offset against tax. But anyway, aside from that, I think it's just been a bit of a I don't think there was any surprises, if I'm honest. And then this entire day, all day, I've just been flooded with investors. What's going on? Should I still buy? Blah, blah, blah. So yeah, interesting.
And this is going to be phone calls, I think, and text messages and emails that all of you guys are going to be fielding probably every day for a little while now. And we're going to go into this in about a 5-10 minute segment from Morgan, from more of a borrowing perspective, Jeremy from more of a taxation and structure, and then Simon from more of a market perspective. And then we'll jump into the Q&A just as everyone's sort of coming in. But otherwise, before we get into each of you guys, anything else that Morgan or Jeremy, you guys wanted to sort of set the stage with, or any anecdotes from today that you wanted to share, mate?
Not necessarily for myself. I mean, yeah, like I've like the other guys, I've had lots of inquiries about what the right way is to go ahead, what the impact is. So yeah, and at least, yeah, I'm not going to spoil it too much with what you may be going to ask later, but yeah, it's just like Simon said, we kind of knew what was coming, so there's no big surprises. It's just, yeah, I guess, we just have to adjust to, right?
Yeah, I think that's the big thing. It's about, I guess it is what it is to a certain extent. Now, how do we best play the hand that they've dealt? But by the sounds of what you were saying a little bit earlier, Jeremy, some of the cards might actually change, and we might not actually be playing the exact hand that we think we are, because this still has to actually pass the Senate. Is that right?
Yeah, so this is definitely a budget without throwing, any party under the bus. I've got my own opinions, which I'll keep to myself, but it is a cut your nose to spite your face type of budget. I think they'll struggle to get the intended effect on who they wanted that to affect. They're after that top 1 to 5%, but they're actually going to wash up probably the 85% of people that need a lot of these policies to grow the wealth. And we've also got to understand as well that this CGT change doesn't just impact property, it impacts all investments, from shares, cryptocurrency, to gold and silver bullion and all the other things. So I stress to everybody, and I've stressed to nearly the 300 emails I've received today and 90 phone calls since 6 o'clock this morning, that the devil will be in the details. What they've given us is a budget which has a lot of fluff in it. In the back end, then it starts to be put into proper legislation, which they present to the floor of the lower house, and then it moves forward to the upper house. A couple of things I was surprised to hear, that I thought Greens would be supporting this like heaven and high water, but it doesn't seem to be the case. There's some things they support, and there's a lot of things they don't. So they'll get it through.
Just to quickly jump in there, Jeremy, what's one of the things they're not supporting? Because I would have assumed the same thing.
Yeah, capital gain tax. They love the negative gearing. They've been pushing on about, taking away negative gearing because it's disproportionate in the sense that when you're negatively geared and you're on a 47% tax bracket, for every dollar you're negatively geared, you get 47% back. And if you're a 32% tax bracket, for every dollar of negative gearing on that same property, for instance, you're only getting 32 cents back. So I understand where they're coming from about the disproportionate tax system, but taxes are disproportionate based on the income we earn. People are still spending the same amount of time. So the argument doesn't go both ways that the Greens have. However, it was interesting to see the lack of support they had for capital gain tax, because one of the reasons why Peter Costello and John Howard removed the indexation method in 99 was because it was sucking out and reducing productivity. There was no investment happening during the 90s. You didn't have, properties transacting like they were today. You didn't have investment into new businesses, because if it did shoot up quite a bit, you were going to get stung with hell of a lot of tax when you take into account the indexation method. So it was taken away to give a lot of productivity, to bring back investment into the Australian economy, to get the Australian people excited about investing again. And it had its intended effect when it was removed. We've gone through the last 26 years with probably the most prosperity out of any country in the world when it comes to living standards and people. So it was interesting to see, while they spoke about all this, I was more interested to see how they were going to frame it. And in my personal opinion, I think there's going to be a lot of pushback, especially from my industry, when you get the big guys involved that actually know what tax legislation is and how to interpret correctly. I think that's where the needle and the penny's going to drop for the government, and there'll be amendments. Don't estimate amendments happen to budget proposals. The Division 296 was proposed in one way. It was amended, reshaped. It didn't pass the upper house and then eventually got through with a lot of compromise. So we might still see a lot of compromise to happen in this federal budget.
And Jeremy, I mean, we may as well open up with yourself first, mate. One question that I actually wanted to ask you was around the carried forward losses. I was actually just reading this before. From July the 1st, 2027, losses related to an existing residential investment property purchase from 7:30 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time will only be deductible against other income for residential properties, including capital gains. However, when an investor has excess losses, they will be able to carry forward that excess to offset residential property income in future years, enabling losses to be carried forward, ensuring investors remain able to claim deductions in the future and costs of maintenance. So does this basically mean negative gearing isn't gone? It's just been changed around and kind of moved forward?
It's the concept has changed how negative gearing works. So again, when you had losses that arose from a property, you could claim that as a deduction against your employment income, your work-related income, your salaries and wage. What they've done is they've segmented the return to say your income and your expenses for work is how you get your refund and interest and dividends and all that stuff. But your property side of things, that's a separate portion within the return. And you'll only be able to claim negative gearing against future related property profits that you make. And if you don't have enough property profits and you might have excess losses because you sold a property and you made a loss, maybe capital loss that is, you can utilize that against the next property you purchase and maybe the passive income that it generates. So they're really segmenting just the property section within inside the return and almost isolating it like its own little business. So you don't get a benefit. And that whole purpose of what they're trying to achieve, Todd, and for all the listeners, is they're creating a brand new floor rate. And that floor rate of tax is 30%. They don't want anyone to access any better tax rate than 30% from your investment-related profits, essentially. And that's a little bit of a bee in my bonnet as accountant, because the way I would work is I would factor in the tax rate of 0 all the way to 47%, and it was up to me to minimize my client's tax to bring it as close as I can to 0. Now, that 0 starts at 30. So effectively speaking, they're saying that 30% now is your best case scenario, and my tax rates to play with now sits between 30 to 47 as opposed to 0 to 47. So they're really limiting. There's still a lot of tax we can save for clients because there is a lot of movement between that 30 to 47% mark, but there was a hell of a lot more benefit between 0 to 47. So that's going to be the major thing that I want to share with people and explain to people. As an accountant, the best we can get is 30%. It's potentially no longer 0.
Mate, and that's obviously going to change our borrowing power in, well, I'm not going to say a big way yet, but Morgan, you're going to give us more detail on that in just a moment. But Jeremy, what are the other big takeaways that everyone really needs to understand as a property investor from both either taxation or structuring point of view?
So first couple of things, let's go through the top level points. So negative gearing on established residential property is effectively gone now for new buyers post the budget. For all of us who hold properties prior to the budget, we still have the ability to continue on as normal from a negative gearing perspective. It's just any future properties we purchase, those will be trapped as losses and later utilised against income that we generate from properties or potential capital gains. And that's effective pretty much for any property with a date of contract after 7:30 p.m. on the 12th of May. For new properties, you will still have the ability to claim negative gearing. The definition of new property, I thought you could knock it down, build a brand new one, and you've got a new property. That may not be the case. You have to actually create more dwellings. So knocking down a home and building 2, for instance, townhouses, apartments, all those other things. So that's something to consider what a new home is. Also, if you buy a home from a builder, it has to happen within the space of about 1 year of completion for it to still be deemed as brand new. So that's something to consider, and depreciation rules will all stay the same for new properties. You also get the benefit of being able to choose both methods, which is the capital gain discount if you sell that new property in the future, or the indexation method. Now, for everybody out there, what's the difference between the two? And we've spoken briefly about it, but for long-term investing, I mean for low growth, long-term, you'll often find the indexation might be better off to calculate what they call the real gain. But if you've got very short-term growth and you want to exit it, you are going to pay a truckload of tax. And this is one of the best ways I can explain it. And I'll use shares as an example because the numbers are smaller to understand. But if you buy a share on the 13th of May under the new CGT rules for $100, you hold that share for 13 months and sell it for $200. If the CPI, which is how the indexation method is calculated, is 4%, roughly at the end of that 13 months, the cost base of your shares is now $104. Now, you've sold it for $200, less your index cost base of $104. You now have to pay tax at your marginal rate on $96, compared to the 50% CGT discount method, where when you had that share sold for $200 and bought for $100, that $100 gain would obtain a 50% discount. So $50 goes in your back pocket, and the other $50 goes into your tax return as taxable income. So that's the difference. The difference now on that example is $96, which you pay tax on at your marginal rate, versus $50, which you pay tax on at your marginal rate. So effectively, under my example, and it's not that exaggerated, these things do happen, effectively you might be paying double the tax that you would have under the 50% discount method. So there's a huge grab there, a significant grab there from the government for capital gain tax. And that's why I've been talking for the last month about the government creating a windfall tax system, because it doesn't feel as bad, I suppose, mentally or from a psyche perspective, that you're giving the government a bit of extra money after you've received this lump sum of cash. So there are a couple of things to think about. One of the big ones, it sounds like the pre-1985 assets lose their CGT exemption. Essentially, they'll have a valuation being done as at the 1st of July to create that new cost basing for the indexing method. So that's huge for a lot of people that have properties that they've purchased before 1985. That's, I think, the month of September. For any property investor that has existing properties, that valuation point in time as of 1 July 2007 becomes very important as well. I'll slow this one down because it's a lot to digest. If you sell the property before 1 July 2027, you'll still be able to obtain a 50% CGT discount method. So that's brilliant. But if you sell the property after 1 July 2027, two calculations happen. So you've got a calculation at a 50% CGT discount up to the value of the property as at 1 July 2027.
And do you just basically get like a retrospective approval if you were to sell it in 3 years' time? That kind of, not retrospective approval, retrospective valuation, or how they calculate?
You can get a retrospective valuation being done.
Okay.
It must be done by a registered property valuer. It can't be done by a real estate agent. That's a market appraisal. So effectively, the two calculations are the 50% CGT discount based upon the normal method of tax that we calculate up to the valuation price on the 1 July 2027 date. And then any time thereafter, once you've created the valuation cost base index, is now under the indexation method for CGT. So there's two calculations now that accountants have to do if people decide to sell their properties after 1 July 2027. So it's a form of grandfathering for everyone that's listening. It's a form of grandfathering, but not traditional grandfathering. So
so it's kind of split. So it's kind of split grandfathering almost.
Correct.
Yeah.
One of the big ones that blindsided me, and I still don't know how they're going to write this into legislation, so I'm very interested to see what they do, was that trusts now will face a 30% tax as a minimum on distribution. So that to me is very, very interesting how they're going to write it. That goes against, historical ways of tax minimization through the use of trusts and the ability to distribute to the beneficiaries and utilize marginal tax rates from different people. But for them to create a floor of 30% tax on the distribution, that to me is a huge negative. Because if you have a income that you've generated from that trust, from passive income the property provides, or from a capital gain, for argument's sake, and you were to distribute to that money to your spouse, where their income would have been zero, and normally you would distribute 20 grand to them, and that's a great way you can get 20 grand tax-free from your investment. Now, under the new legislation that they proposed last night, it will face a tax of 30%, which in this particular case, on that 20 grand now that you distribute to your spouse, where you thought you'd pay no tax, you are now paying $6,000. So that's a massive and significant change in historical tax legislation around trusts. It's literally rewriting the playbook on it. And speaking to people that have been in the industry for nearly 60 years, they don't even know how it's going to be written, because there's things to consider, like how they're going to factor in that 30%, whether it's imputation credit, effectively if it flows through to the individual or not, and the individual gets a credit or an offset for it. So that's a really big one.
And this is something that I know we're going to open up in a lot more detail as well, because we've got tons of questions around structure for yourself as well, how this is going to be different. Is it still any good to even buy in your personal name? But if we can open that up in a little bit more detail in a minute, mate. And Simon, I do really want to get your thoughts on this shortly as well, around if there's going to be this 12-month window around people being able to still get the CGT discount. Are we potentially going to see this mass sell-off? But before we jump into that, Simon, do you mind, Morgan, if we actually jump into a little bit of what you've been modeling out from a borrowing power perspective? Because I think this is the thing that's on everyone's lips, because already from the past, 4 or 5 months, the start of the year, the average Australian household, I think, has already had their borrowing power stripped by around sort of $75,000. Now, if we can't claim back negative gearing benefits, I know you've been playing with a whole lot of different modeling today. Do you mind opening up a bit of this and basically shedding some light on what our options are, mate?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, for the people that are listening, so this is something I suppose that I kind of do for clients of mine, where we'll show them what I call a property roadmap. And basically, it will show them how far their borrowing capacity goes on paper when we look at positioning their borrowing power and income with different banks to ultimately show a bit of a roadmap when it comes to building out a portfolio. And yeah, with what I'm about to show, this, I guess, really shows when, if a couple who, I've kind of made up a bit of a scenario to demonstrate this, but when a couple decide to go from like going down the journey of really just maxing out borrowing power versus no negative gearing benefits, what that actually looks like. So just bear with me a sec. I'll just get my screen sorted and then we'll get going. But
and we keep cutting back to a shot of me. I'm not sure what's going on there. Jen, if that's you, just in case. I think people want to see Morgan right now, not me. But and if you've got a screen share, mate, then yeah, I'll pop that up in just 2 secs.
Okay, awesome. I'll get it going. So just checking, can you guys see that all right?
Not just yet. Give me 2 secs. Here we go. Add it in. Done, mate.
Okay, cool. So I need to do a bit of explaining about this so people understand. So like I mentioned, this is something that I do offer to clients as a service of mine. And when it came to mapping this out, I based this on a couple that were earning just shy of about a collective 200K income. No kids. They've got their own home with a very small mortgage on it. And really the goal was to just show them, with a bit of savings in the mix, to see how far their borrowing power would go. And to a degree, I've tried to keep this as realistic based on purchase prices we typically see in this market today. So for this couple, for example, we actually kind of went ahead and assumed they're going to buy their first 2 properties with about a 10% deposit. So 600, 650, and that's pretty much as far as they can go with major banks. So lending with 3 banks on that sort of income, no kids. And keeping in mind, by the way, this is built on quite a few assumptions. So in order to really present a fair and comparable comparison between both, we had to hold a few things constant. So
okay, what were those things?
Yeah, so I've got it over here, but it's really all lending except the home loan debt being on 5 years interest only. All of the gross rental yields on each property they buy, I've kept it at about a 4% gross rental yield. I mean, I don't know how hard or relaxed these people would go about going it, but I really just kept everything constant, like income, rent, everything else the same. And I guess I've also held bank policies and rates the same across all of these banks.
Yep.
So, yeah, so you're going to say something, Todd?
No, I was just going to say, so obviously this is going to change a little bit if rates change, but again, rates are always kind of changing. They're never a static sort of percentage that we're working with. But already, man, this is looking better than I thought. I was expecting much worse. But I'll let you keep going unpacking the details.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, like I kind of mentioned, to make this as fair and comparable as possible, we haven't actually modeled in equity releases to fund the growth of this. Once we kind of add that into the mix, it does make it quite hard to compare both scenarios. obviously that's what we would do as we go down our journey. But for the sake of it, like you would get to 2 investment properties at this sort of level before you then drop down to second tier banks. And the key here is then being able to buy, I guess, another 3 with what I would call third tier lenders. So that's, I suppose, the negative gearing one, where we can claim all of the negative gearing on each investment property. The interesting part, though, is when we kind of flip the switch and pretend that there's no negative gearing. And that's where it gets...
I feel like I spoke too soon then. Okay, I thought that's what you were showing me. Okay.
Yeah, this is with negative gearing. So if we remove negative gearing and this couple started their journey, they would actually be able to go and get 5 properties. So 5 plus the home. It's actually not as bad. But the thing that's quite interesting about this is IP 1 and 2 are literally the same. It does not change. However, for IP 3, we actually have to use a more relaxed second tier lender before we then drop down to IP 4 and 5. So there's 1 less property on screen. However, we're kind of going towards the bottom end of third tier lending. So Liberty, like, they've got their place in the market, but their cash flow and their rates is going to not be nearly as favorable as MA Money and Ord Financial. And that's the key difference between both. If they were to start their journey with just being in their home and then saying, hey, like, we want to invest, we'll use some cash to buy these 2, and then keep going, that's the key difference.
Okay, so this isn't good news. This isn't helping us borrow more, but this isn't potentially the news that is portfolio killer that some people are expecting. So we're basically looking at this from it was going to be 6. And again, this scenario with these specific situations, everyone's scenario is going to be slightly different, but it's basically gone from 6 to 5.
Sorry, can I just inject something? I just want to inject a question.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's because
absolutely
going to Liberty that early, which typically, Morgan, they'll have higher interest rates. Roughly, what's the difference compared to CBA on average? I won't hold you to it.
You're probably looking at like high 7s or low 8s with Liberty. So
say 150 basis points difference, give or take?
Pretty much, yeah. So like if you go into that level, that's where I'd be saying, hey, we need to have a plan to leave this bank because we don't want to stay there forever. Maybe I'll be asking things about their future, like, hey, are you going to have a salary increase or a bonus? Or if you're self-employed, what does your next year look like? Can we leave these banks to ultimately improve the cash flow of that property? Because then it becomes more of a focus on opportunity cost instead of like just going ham and not caring about the repercussions.
Because that would, to me, would be one of the questions clients would raise with me. Hey, going through to these very third aggressive tier lenders early, which I've used in the past, so they're great, get you to where you need to be, you love them, you leave them. But if you're stuck there, you are ultimately going to pay a significant level of costs higher compared to being with a mainstream lender. And therefore, without that negative gearing benefit potentially to be able to give you some reprieve, that's where it might be a tricky thing where you can get there, but can you actually hold it there? And that's where you don't want to have a ball and chain to your job.
This is where I'm also thinking that it's realistically the landscape's going to change. Yield is going to be so much more important. It's always been important to balance yield in the capital growth side of things, but it's going to be even more now moving forward. And looking at this still, so if you were to stick more so with like first tier, so you got 2 with Combank and then Resimac and First Mac. So basically we've got more normal interest rates on PPR, IP 1, 2, and 3, but then 4 and 5. If you want to keep pushing it, you've really got to have a plan around this deal, because if you've got an interest rate in like 7.7, 8%, whatever it is, it's higher. You've got to have a plan to be able to really get out.
100%. And yeah, like that's where it could maybe be an opportunity cost play, or, you know, maybe it's not. And so it's like, that's where it's really important for us to, I guess, put that investor hat on and actually do the cash flow. Like, can the portfolio sustain that? And if it can't, like, how much of your after-tax income can you put aside every month to cover that deficit? And if it's a matter of waiting 6, 12 months to then leave, because maybe nothing on the horizon is going to change that you can implement, then maybe there's something I can do in that time frame. So yeah, it just comes down to that. But if it's like the deal of a lifetime and you have to use a bank like that to get it done, cool. But then it comes back to how are we going to leave that bank?
Got it.
And is there anything else that you wanted to open up on a lending side of things, Morgan? It's a big change before we move on to Simon and his thoughts on the big changes around the market.
I mean, look, we talked a lot about at this stage with, like, I suppose we haven't even brushed on using entities at this point. And that's maybe something to unpack a little bit later. But I think at this point, with what I modeled out, like, that's something that I've assumed banks are just going to completely scrap. We don't know what their position is on the negative gearing, when they're going to implement it. So I've obviously done my best to try and show something what it could look like. We don't know. Like, they might, as you know, we've talked about, include negative gearing on everything that people have already got. And then maybe the rest might just kind of get looked at like most trust lending does, so company lending.
At the end of the day, banks are in the business of lending us money. Like, the less they lend us, it's kind of their bread and butter. It's what they like to do. So the more of it that we can borrow, the better it is for them as well. But mate, I'm going to.
Sorry,
sorry, Jeremy, you had something to say there, mate?
Sorry to interrupt, but the red tape involved now and documentation and records becomes so important for people in Morgan's industry, because you now need to make sure that you know when you bought the property. You need to advise the mortgage broker of that, because if you're assuming they're just going to know all this stuff, it's going to be really difficult, especially determining what's eligible for negative gearing and what's not. And that's going to be guided by the banks and how they change their borrowing capacity calculations.
So true. Yeah, mortgage broking aggregators are going to have to, I suppose, update how we are meant to update now, I suppose, when the property was purchased, so we can figure out if there's negative gearing. So there's probably going to be some changes to standard operating procedure. And yeah, I think that's really important, because we'll obviously need to know that to present the most accurate position to banks going forward.
Beautiful. Simon, wanted to ask you a few questions, mate, around what your thoughts are, what's going to happen with the market potentially, because potentially is the key word here, as far as a potential sell-off over the next 12 months, opportunities. Where do you want to start, mate?
Yeah, look, I think at the end of the day, I think we're going to probably see some changes to what was announced. So I don't want to make any predictions per se. But as I'm sure you know, I haven't been a big fan of negative gearing, ever since I started investing in properties and buying properties, whether it's for myself or for clients or whatever. And I still maintain that. Look, when I first started buying properties, it was easy to get positive or neutral cash flow properties off the bat. But over time, as property prices have increased and the rents haven't caught up, from my perspective, negative gearing has been a necessary evil to buy properties in areas that are more likely to grow. And I keep talking about major capital cities, in areas where, affordable housing still exists, because ultimately that's where, humans have to live, right, at the end of the day. And I think the winners of this particular budget are some developers, anyone selling developer stock, off the plan house and land packages, where they get a massive incentive, a massive bonus, and a massive commission structure. Existing landlords, people like myself, who already have properties and have the grandfathering and so on. But also the amount of rents that are going to be increased in the short term, is not something that I'm like jumping up and down about, because at the end of the day, my tenants across the board are going to be impacted the most. But it's going to be inevitable, at the end of the day.
Can you
new
talk
investors,
us a little bit? Sorry, Simon, to jump in. Can you just talk in a little bit more about the details around why you think rents are going to increase, mate? Because I'm sure that's something that everyone's just kind of leant forward a little bit on.
Well, rents will go up because investors just won't sell, or are less incentivized to sell. Investors will also be, new investors will also be, well, at least I guess the herd investors will be reluctant to buy, which will make less stock available. So in very high rental demand, affordable housing areas, there's just going to be more rental pressure. There's going to be less supply available. Landlords as well look, collectively, I think if you take away negative gearing benefits, especially for some of the newer landlords that have purchased in the past 5 or so years, they're just going to pass the expenses on to the tenant, or as much as possible, right? And the underlying problem is still not addressed. Huge housing shortage, right? We don't have enough houses. We've got more people pouring into this country, and a lot of comments, I'm reading, are saying, just because landlords increase rent, it doesn't mean tenants are going to pay for it. Well, they are, because for every house available, there's dozens, if not hundreds of people needing that property to live in. So ultimately it's just going to keep going up to the point where it just becomes right at the edge of affordability. I think, look, at the end of the day, the people that the government was trying to help, so renters and first home buyers, I think they're the ones that are going to lose. They're the ones that are going to cop it the most. In my world, the world of buyers agents and property experts and so on, I think it's really going to shake up the industry quite a lot, in the sense that, I think we talked about this briefly prior to us going live. It's really going to separate the men from the boys, I think, because a lot of people have been, as been spooking regional areas, regional markets, and so on. That's going to be super risky moving forward, because a lot of those areas have been reliant on mostly investor activity, and ultimately areas where this is going to flourish, or the results of this is going to flourish, is still these major capital cities where, at the end of the day, people just have to go to, people have to live in. There's no like exception to that. People come to Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Perth, all these big cities to live in, because that's where all the jobs are.
Matt, and obviously this is opinion, but people are wanting your opinion on this right now. So if we're talking about the regional side of things, potentially what you feel like it's going to take a hit. And I want to preface this with, if everything actually goes through the way that it's been told it will, as of last night, because we still don't know everything's actually going to get passed. Can you give us a little bit of where do you actually see regional areas potentially going over the next kind of 6, 12, 24 months if everything does actually pass?
Well, I think there'll be an exodus of investors as much as possible. And I think there'll be not enough buyers around. So there'll be a bit of a race to the bottom, I think. If a bunch of investors are panicked, if they're not getting the capital gains, if they're not getting the amount of rent required to cover expenses, then people are just going to sell, but there's going to be no buyers. So yeah, it's, I kind of talked about this ad nauseum prior to the budget as well. And one of the reasons why we keep focusing on these big cities is for this particular reason, right? For things like this to happen. One of the reasons why we avoid negative gearing is because of things like this, that can change at the drop of a hat. But yeah, I think there'll be an exodus. I think there'll be a large shift back to major capital cities, especially as inflation rises and as interest rate rises as well, because, cost of living and so on, people are going to be a lot more realistic. They're going to come back to big cities because that's where the jobs are, that's where the infrastructure is, that's where their sort of livelihoods that they've escaped from, to make the sea change or tree change, are going to be, not optional, basically.
Is there anything else that anyone else wants to add in on the market change potential, Jeremy or Morgan, before we start throwing to a few questions? Anything you guys want to build on what Simon's just said?
You want to go first, Morgan? I've got opinions if you want to go.
I kind of want to mention something that I was speaking to Todd about off air, actually, because we were kind of like hypothesizing some ways that people could still, use their existing properties to help them get tax benefits. So maybe you can actually chime in on this a bit. But at least one thing we're talking about is people, I suppose, doing really large equity releases from existing properties to get some of those tax benefits, but then also use that to buy property with more or less smaller loans. And it's something that, I've kind of been thinking about most of like today and yesterday, because I think the people who could probably successfully do that and get the most out of that scenario be the kind of people that most likely have a ton of equity and also a ton of borrowing power. But then, is that the best way to approach investing? I'm not exactly sure. It's probably only applicable to like ultra high net worths or not, your mum and dad's. I'm curious to know what you think though, Jeremy.
Our challenge is that you extract equity from a property, the deduction goes where the equity went to from a purpose perspective. So a lot of people goes, well, I'm just going to go and extract equity out and I'll make it ultra negatively geared. Well, it doesn't work that way. Where the equity goes to is where the interest is claimed. So that's a very important thing to note, because they've got this very special concept with the ATO called Part 4A, which is a tax avoidance rule, and they want to make sure people are doing things inside the spirit of the law. But the strategies around that are as well, you might be buying properties in other entities. Your goal would be to pay off those properties in the other entities in the long term, work towards paying them down. After all, non-deductible debt is taken care of first. And then you focus on those properties which are highly negatively geared, potentially in your own name, if they are in that particular case. So your strategy now isn't just tax, but also what you do at certain points in time with your investment portfolio. And now no properties or no assets are created equal. You've got to really strategize what's more important in the portfolio and what do you focus on and attack first. Debt recycling, Morgan, you and I have been a big fan of it. That potentially may have its implications, because a lot of people try to do it to obtain cash in the hand through, lowering non-deductible debt, extracting the equity back out, pushing that towards a new property in the goal of getting some additional tax benefit back. I know a lot of high net wealth individuals use that to buy high value properties. That has its challenge now, because you're not going to be getting your 47% back for properties purchased post 12th of May, 7:30 p.m. So that throws a bit of a spanner in the works to a beautiful way of recycling your debt to gain some tax benefits. From a market perspective, I know just myself and speaking to some people to get their concepts, what we will see, and I'll happy to be corrected as well, anyone here, but that top end of the market where land tax makes up 40% of the rental income and council rates and interest, and these properties are 50, 60, 70, $100,000 negatively geared, you're going to see that top end of the market start to say, well, we're not going to buy that top end for investment anymore. We're going to start to come down to that middle end of the market, because we've got cash to be able to maybe lower the debt, or it may be potentially high yields, and we probably will see more competition. So more demand in that middle market, more demand in that affordable market, which goes to answer one of those questions I saw from Manpreet. How do you see the market in the short term under 650K? I think that's going to have a lot more pressure. It's going to pump, because that's typically where those yields are a little bit stronger, and typically where you start to say, well, you know what, 10, 15 grand negatively geared that I can't claim as a tax benefit is a hell of a lot better than 100 grand. I've got legacy clients. I've genuinely got legacy clients that they've got properties where land tax is through the roof. They've owned it in their personal name for such a long time. They're going to start to question if it's worthwhile keeping it through that extreme amount of capital growth they've seen, because they were getting that tax benefit cash-wise via the refund to help them hold that property long term. So it'll be interesting to see that convergence of markets and what that does and how it creates additional demand, especially in the more affordable area. And one of the main things I think we've all missed, and the budget last night absolutely glossed over it because it's a main sticking point, is we had 1 million migrants come in over the last 4 years, another 1 million migrants to come in over the next 4 years. So that's 2 million migrants to come in. We have just created, and I know, Todd, I'm going to use your backyard for this, but we've just created Adelaide, if not potentially all of South Australia, in the space of 2 years. And our infrastructure and our housing build program has not even kept up anywhere near to what's coming in. So that itself is going to put significant pressure on rental, on housing market, and there's only one place to go. And in my opinion, I think the government knows that, and they're happy to get, again, a lot of that windfall that's going to come from it.
Morgan and I were talking about this just the other day when we were hanging out, and it was like, what was it again, Morgan? Geelong, with the projected population growth just for Geelong, and then you look at the average people per dwelling, it's like 2.5, and it was something like one person an hour on average is projected to move to Geelong over the next 10 years, meaning that they need to build 4 houses every day just in Geelong to actually keep up with demand. I don't know the exact building rates, but I'm pretty sure they're not building 4 houses every single day in Geelong. And like doubling down more to your point, Jeremy, it's and if I can just actually ask it, because I think the chat that you and I were having, and this is definitely not going to be applicable for everyone, this is only going to be applicable for a few, and I wanted probably more Morgan and Jeremy's opinion on this, and we'll flick to the Q&A side of it. What I was talking about beforehand with restructuring a bit more of that debt wasn't so much pulling out equity and putting it onto the other property, because like Jeremy's saying, it's the intent of that where the tax deduction actually lies. It was more so about actually unlocking a title. So if you actually had, let's say, 3 investment properties and they're all worth, I don't know, 500,000 each, just to keep it easy numbers, and you had like 800 grand-ish debt over the entire portfolio, would you be better off then getting one that was like the new one, unlocking that completely, restructuring, so then that would be freehold, and then if you had 2 previous ones that were bought before last night, basically maxing those LVRs out as much as possible to then hold that debt in a tax deductible structure, or more so not a structure, a tax deductible asset because of the date of purchase. Does that make sense? And I'm getting you're already smiling at me, Jeremy. I don't know if I'm getting too creative or if this is just like, nah, Todd, you're swinging, man. Tell me.
Out of the park on that one.
Yeah.
Look, I think people got to play it with a straight bat. And unfortunately, 7:30 p.m. came across us. It's done. There's not a huge amount we can do to change the past. It's more so actively looking towards the future. I do see significant level of opportunities. I've built my portfolio in off the back of significant events. One being the GFC, the next being the Banking Royal Commission, the next being the COVID pandemic. This is one of those events that we will look back in 5 years' time, as Simon's mentioned a couple of times, and this will be something that's a nothing. And to be honest, in my opinion, I didn't want to get too political, but I will. A grenade that's been gift wrapped has been handed to the Liberal Party and One Nation. I just hope they don't trip over the carpet trying to get there. But if you take this type of policy to a next election, this, as I said, it's a cut your nose to spite your face scenario, and you will see a lot more people being impacted. The ones they didn't want to impact, they're the ones that are going to feel the pinch, more so than the top 1% of investors who, let's face it, aren't using negative gearing as a strategy for most part.
Literally changes nothing for me.
Yes,
personally.
they're hoarding profits, and for many people, it's business as usual in that top end of the spectrum they're aiming for.
Yeah.
I mean, for a lot of people, they aren't even negative geared. You know, like the house prices and rent prices have gone up so much in the past three to 5 years. You know, unless you bought in a terrible area, I mean, a lot of the houses that you bought 5 years ago will be neutral to positive already. You know, look, the other thing is, what's confusing for me is, you know, for some reason, government thinks developers are not for profit. You know, I mean, if I was a developer right now, I'd be rubbing my hands thinking about the price increases I'm going to pass on to the buyers using this massive carrot I can now dangle in front of, you know, unsuspecting mums and dads, you know,
Yes.
and you're going to overpay even further. And, you know, we talked about this a lot as well, Todd, in previous podcasts, but so many people in Sydney bought off the plan units in Zetland, in Waterloo, in Mascot, as an example. And during the massive boom phase that Sydney went through, where properties doubled, some cases tripled in value, some of these investors, or I should say, victims of scams, bought these units and they were still in the red, you know, after all that time. So I think a lot of people are going to be lured by these incentives of, you know, new builds and townhouses and so on, having all these benefits now, and they're going to overpay. They're going to overpay and buy in areas as well. That's, you know, like where the demand for housing is just not there. You know,
rental ghettos, Simon. That's what I've heard a comment today, is that there'll be enclaves of just investors who bought there to get tax benefits, And then the struggle will be is then how do they then sell it to the next person without the shiny object of negative gearing that they bought into. So people got to be smart and understand the basic fundamentals. You want strong demand from all parties of the property spectrum, not just investors only.
100%. You guys, right, if I start throwing to a few questions, or is there something else you wanted to wrap up with that, Simon?
Well, the other thing I wanted to maybe think about, for listeners to maybe have a think about, is the next 12 months is going to be very interesting. Personally, and this is taking off my buyer's agent's hat, like if I was an investor right now, building my initial portfolio of properties to enable me to get passive income at some point in the future, I'd be buying as many properties as I can because rents are going to go up. I want to be exposed to that. But I think it also incentivizes a lot of people to take advantage of this 12-month window where, you can still negative gear. And I think a lot of flippers, a lot of renovators are going to want to be buying up properties now, do a quick reno and try and flip it and sell it before June 30, 2027. So I think we'll actually see a mini boom in the right areas off the back of some of these changes. Not saying that to cause panic buying or FOMO. We should always still stay level-headed and just assess it based on numbers and fundamentals. But at the end of the day, I think, especially in the affordable housing market, like anything major capital city sub 800K, I think is going to be extremely hot property.
Jeremy, can I just quickly jump in with that? Because I've been reading so much about this that I may have got it wrong. I thought negative gearing was gone as of last night. Have I read that wrong or what? Because I want to make sure I've also got this right.
So for all purchases after 7:30 p.m. 12th of May budget night, negative gearing will be available up until 1 July 2027, and then post that, no negative gearing. But for people who have purchased pre-budget, negative gearing will still apply even post to 1 July 2027.
Fantastic, mate. Thank you for clearing that up. All right, I'm going to throw to a few questions here. I've got one that's just come in. Got a few Playbook members that have chucked some in first. So I've got, for new investors, this is from Shiv, is it still a good idea to buy in personal name, or is structure now the default way to go? Jeremy, I'm guessing this one is going to be straight directed at you, mate.
Look, I'm still of the big believer, no matter what, you're entering into the property market for the first time. I still think keep it simple, keep it easy, buy in your own name for that first property. You got to factor in the cost of establishing a new entity. You got to factor in the cost of maintaining that entity, which is 2, 3, 4, 5 times higher than the cost of your own personal tax return with maybe just one property. So the arbitrage between the cost that you got to pay with professionals versus the potential tax implications, short-term, long-term, that needs to be factored in. Also, you've got to look at the type of asset that you're buying as well. Are you trying to go for an asset which is going to have a lot of growth at the very start, or you're thinking you're picking the right horse and it's going to do really well? Then you might want to look at companies. But that way you kind of eliminate the indexation method, and then you get to drip feed the profit you make in the company through dividends moving forward in the future to help smooth out that tax. So ultimately it stays at no greater than 30%. But just for basic purposes, your first property, maybe even your second, you might just want to do it personally while you don't have the negative gearing benefits, while you've got indexing there that you need to factor in. I think to alleviate the cost that you'll have to pay during the longevity or for the longevity of holding that property, I think that outweighs, that cost outweighs the benefit. If you're bought your first and you're ready for your second, and this is a journey you want to take, you'll find now that companies, proprietary limited entities, which generally are reserved for more trading or for very sophisticated investors, you'll find that they'll come into your portfolio again a lot sooner, structured the right way, based on what I said earlier, to maintain that best result as accountants that we can get now under the new legislation or new budget proposal is at 30%. Because I mentioned before, as an accountant, I used to play in the realms between 0 and 47%. Now we're playing in the realms of 30 to 47. And a company is where it gives you that certainty, at least when you sell that property, you'll pay 30% tax on the profit. And I mentioned before about indexing. If it's a low, slow growth property that you're going to hold for a very long time, you'll often find that the indexation method doesn't steer too far away from what the capital gain 50% discount provided. So they're the things I'd be looking at. Keep it simple, keep it straightforward for the first one. Progressively now, as you grow, you'll enter into companies as opposed to trusts. My worry is that if the high use of companies starts to form part of everybody's investment structure,
They're going to change it.
state governments like New South Wales, which at present give a land tax threshold to a company of $1,075,000, I guarantee you, Chris Minns or whoever's in the Premier of New South Wales at that stage will change the land tax legislation to exclude companies from having a land tax threshold to obtain a bigger cash grab. Because trusts were typically the investment entity. Now companies are going to be that new investment vehicle.
And this is the game. It's always going to be changing, and we always need to make sure that we're adapting to the rules, playing it the best that we can, because lending is going to change with this. The market's going to potentially change a bit with this, and the entities that we hold in are potentially now going to change with this. But it's interesting to actually hear you say that even now, with all of these changes, negative gearing going aside, that still buying in your own name for when you're at the beginning is potentially still the best way. When you're looking at it, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jeremy, but essentially the whole picture of your cash flow, when you actually take into account all of your setup costs, your holding costs, everything that goes with actually running that entity, then you're looking at this going, just start simple and then get a bit more complicated, because there's more to it essentially. Is that right?
Absolutely. I look at life from an arbitrage perspective. A dollar saved is a dollar earned, still with that accounting hat on. And I think that's a really good way to attack it. And as I said, there's always room for growth. And the first property you buy is not the only property you'll buy. And you may not even keep it for the longer duration of your journey. It might be one of the first ones you sell.
Beautiful, man. I reckon the next one's got your name all over this, Morgan. This is from Spiro. So in the current lending environment, what are the primary constraints limiting portfolio serviceability, and how are sophisticated investors structuring around them?
Yeah, okay. So I think at a high level, it comes down to two things, because there's only so much, I guess, mortgage brokers can wave a magic wand at to make things happen. And then the other side of it is like, you as the investor, like what can you do or change to really make the portfolio grow? So in this current environment, I mean, I would first of all urge people to focus on what they can control and what they're willing to do, even if it is for a short period of time, to really give themselves the best chance to increase their borrowing power, to maybe release equity, to buy the next property, and so on. Kind of like what we're going over before, like there's also times where you're going to have to be a bit cautious. And like when I was chatting with Jeremy before about, using banks like third tier lenders, like I wouldn't be doing that without having extreme caution or having a plan where you know that you can then do something to then move to a better bank to improve the cash flow, maybe rebalance the portfolio, and potentially go again. So things that I'm talking about, people and what they can control, it could be as simple as changing or reviewing their living expenses. Or like, as we've kind of talked about in the show, like some people could just choose to go and live with parents or friends rent-free for a very short period of time. That could help them either buy more property, rebalance the portfolio. So to a degree, it depends how badly people want it. But then like to the other side too, like there's only so much I can do as the broker with someone's portfolio if nothing's changed. So yeah, we could possibly use entities and use some of the bank's policies, but then there's the two other aspects as well, which Jeremy mentioned. First of all is the cash flow. Does the cash flow check out for you as the investor, like with your after-tax income? Can you sustain that? But then also like the other piece of the puzzle is like, where are you buying? And what does that mean? And then if the other member in your team is the accountant, like what kind of advice are you getting on that front? Is that the right advice? Like, is that the right vehicle? So all of those kind of things come together when it comes to building a portfolio, and it's not as simple as that. And also everyone's unique and different. So I think it's really depends on those two things overall though.
What I'm really hearing with that as well, Morgan, is making sure that you've got a plan, you've actually tested your options, because if you are going to go down the path of expanding, doing 7-8% like higher interest rates, tier threes, like you said, you don't just jump into that. That's the kind of thing that if you're doing it, it's only because you've got a plan to get out of it and away from there as well, instead of just expanding for the sake of expanding and then going, wait a second, I don't think I can afford to actually hold this, whether it's in a structure or not.
Yeah, and I mean, geez, like I'm not the kind of broker that gives like investing advice. That's just not my jam. But like I will tell people like, hey, like make sure you do the cash flow numbers. Like, yeah, it's just really important, because if it's going to put you in a worse off position, or you don't have a plan to improve that cash flow later, and I can't do anything to help, then you could actually be in for a world of hurt. So it's just important to do your numbers before you make decisions like that.
Perfect. This next one, I reckon's got your name written all over it, is Simon. This one is from Jaden, if I've got this on right. So what are the best property investment opportunities in this new budget for those who already own properties? How can we capitalize on it? Essentially, what's the big opportunity in the market to come of all of this, mate?
Look, stick to the fundamentals, stick to where people are moving to en masse. So, major capital cities, definitely. I think affordable housing areas within major capital cities, I think there's going to be a massive push for, people to, whether they're starting out or whether they're first home buyers, or whether they used to pay $2,000 a week or $3,000 a week in a nice, sexy blue chip rental, and they're having to downsize now. They're having to tighten their belts. I think these are consistently the areas that not only weather the storm when the proverbial shit hits the fan, but they actually flourish, because at the end of the day, the demand for these areas and the demand for these types of properties are unrelenting, and also, I've done in previous podcasts that we're targeting these sort of Sydney units now. And I strongly believe that these are the types of properties with very high yielding and very low entry base. They're probably one of the safest places to be investing right now. You're getting 6 to 7% yields off the bat. One thing I will say is there is no excuse now more than ever to pay over retail or even retail. There's bargains galore. We're seeing tons of them every single day, and really the safest and most riskless way to safeguard yourself is to make sure you're getting something that you have confidence that if you were to sell it the next day, let's not even talk about making a profit, at least you're not going to take a loss, or a minimal loss after buying and selling costs. Don't get caught in the hype. I've had multiple investors call me and ask me, hey, Simon, should I buy brand new properties now? Should I buy an off the plan? Should I target regional? Definitely do not. At the end of the day, I think a lot of people are going to be left high and dry by making very poor decisions, because it's opening the doors to a whole new realm of spruiking, So we just be very, very careful. Always focus on where people have to live, not where people want to live, not where people even choose to live, but where they have to live. And I think if we just stick to that, you'll be fine. And in fact, you'll probably flourish at the end of the day. So, yeah.
So it's more of a needs industry, as it's always been for yourself. It's not a luxury. Hence why you've always looked at it going, okay, what are the places, what are the types of properties that everyone's always going to have demand around? Because that's the stuff that's going to be safer moving forward, no matter what changes.
Yeah, and it's also the stuff that's going to see the biggest rent increases. Not just off the back of the proposed changes, but also because there's just going to be a huge amount of people needing these properties. Right. So what might start off as negative cash flow, if you were to buy today, might only be a very temporary thing. Or even some of the properties, we've been buying in Perth and other parts of big cities a year or two ago, they've already increased rents by $200 a week, just with two lease renewals. So, if you kind of want to be exposed to that, you kind of want to be exposed to as much rental increase as possible, obviously based on the fact that, negative gearing is not going to be, is going to be a thing of the past. But the other thing I want to mention is, look, I'm almost like I'm very confident that a lot of these policies are going to change, probably in the next 2 years, at least until a new government comes into place. So another thing I would probably suggest is don't make any rash decisions based on any of this. Don't change your strategy, don't change your structure, don't go out and start buying 50 off the plan units, because almost certainly number one, you're going to be overpaying, but you're probably going to have some regret, a couple of years down the track as well. So
just buy 49 of them instead of 50.
Yeah.
The text messages.
Don't even buy one.
People are spending lots of money, Todd, on text messages at the moment. I must have seen 5 or 6 text messages of new house and land packages have just been made available. Literally text. It's hilarious just how quickly the vultures come out.
There's a few companies out there that'll be licking their lips right now. But and if you guys are enjoying this as well, being our very first Facebook Live, I actually think we might do more of these. This is funner than what I thought it would be. But if I can do words. See, this is why I don't like the lives, and why I was thinking I would have just cut that if this was a normal episode, but I can't now. Anyway, if you guys are enjoying this, hit the like button, leave a comment. I can already see so many more comments flowing in. We've got more questions to unpack that have come from you guys that have already sent in. And like I said at the very start, we sent an email out to everyone in the Pizza and Property community. And whilst we get into a few Playbook members first, we've got so many. We had literally hundreds of questions submitted. So we've actually had to kind of amalgamate a few of them. Otherwise, we'd be here until like the next day. So I'm going to jump into a couple more here. I've actually got one that Morgan, I think this is actually going to be a really good fit for you, mate. I'm just going to pop this on the screen here. With budget restricting negative gearing, how will borrowing capacity and serviceability assessments change across personal name, company? Oops, sorry, that just went away. Sorry, let's do that again. Company structures and SMSFs.
Yeah, I think if it were to get changed by banks, then I think from a borrowing power in personal name, kind of like what we looked at, there's going to be a bit of a negative change. Another thing as well, which I didn't really model in, but also could be a thing too, and it's what Jeremy actually touched on, is if tax brackets are going to change in the background as well, like the bank's serviceability calculators might slightly tweak. I don't think it's going to be anything massive, but look, it could be small, it could be big, it could be the difference between one bank or another for some people. So for personal names, I think, it might actually slightly decrease. If it's from a company or a trust sort of entity, then I think it's more or less play on. Like most banks assess that without the negative gearing, because in reality, those entities don't get it. There's a small handful that do, but who knows, that might actually change. And then with SMSF, it more or less gets assessed the same way. I don't know if they're going to strip that out too, but I think that one is also play on. So that's kind of my thoughts on it. I guess we'll probably have to wait and see what the banks do though.
Yeah, that's going to be the interesting thing, and how much. I think I called you at 8 a.m. this morning being like, have you got emails yet from them? Have they said anything yet?
Yeah.
But obviously we're going to have to be waiting a little while for the official notice for that one. But thank you for that, for Morgan. We've also got one coming in here from Brad. Brad, actually, no, did we do Brad? No, we haven't done Brad. No. It seems the main benefit of discretionary of the family trust is nullified. Is a unit trust the right alternative? And is there a CGT exempt window to restructure? Jeremy, I reckon this one's pointed straight at you, mate.
Yeah, one of the focuses of utilizing the discretionary trust as an investment vehicle has changed quite substantially. As Simon mentioned, there might be some changes and amendments. This is one of those ones which will have lots of changes and amendments. I was having a chat with some people at very large end of town at the PricewaterhouseCoopers, and their take on it was this is going to definitely be amended. They're going to get some consultation. So what people need to do is monitor the release and consultation papers of the draft legislation, which people do have access to. It'll be put on the budget website. So that's something you guys can have your say on. Anyone can, but big end of town tends to have a little bit more money to lobby that.
Sorry, Jez, just to quickly jump in. When you say to monitor it, what exactly are we looking for there, mate, if we're monitoring that?
They will actually provide the draft legislation that they will be talking about. This is all public. Once it's been set at budget night, then they can actually release the draft legislation, so you can look at it, and there'll be consultation. There'll be people submitting stuff, which again you can get access to. So that's something that I think will be quite contentious. Everyone I spoke to doesn't even know what they're going to do, how they're going to use it from a credit imputation credit system and how they do it. At the moment, though, bucket companies are a little bit dead because of that potential double taxation, 30% tax to the distribution, and then tax with inside the bucket company as well. I personally wouldn't look at unit trusts just yet. I think companies would be probably better because the same thing will apply. Taxed at 30% straight away when it distributes, and then that acts as a credit within your own name, and you'll then pay your own marginal tax rate. Where with a company, you'll get, your 30% flat tax based on the profit it earns. I do think, though, a big pivot will occur. We'll see these two structures, being a self-managed super fund and a company, now primarily being used for investing moving forward, because super funds were, from the looks of it, untouched. They've left the 1/3 discount. They've left the 15% tax rate. And super funds as a structure, still without a doubt, even after the budget night, remain, and probably even further remain, to be the best tax incentivized way to create wealth. So that's what I'm seeing on my side. That's what I'm looking at personally now. I'm going to start to filter in more non-concessional contributions into super. That's my personal circumstances, to buy more assets in super, to be in a better tax advised structure, to keep it away from this 30% and potentially higher tax rate that Labor have wanted to impose.
All right, thank you for that, Jeremy. I've got another one here from, this one's from Kush. Could you lose money after indexation if your July 1, 2027 valuation is higher than your 2029 sale price? If this can happen, what do you do with that loss?
The answer is you don't. I'm trying to think of the best way. You haven't lost money because you've probably sold it for more than what you paid for it, but you won't pay that portion of indexation tax. So yes, there are circumstances where you have no indexation, no profit from the realised gain of the indexation method. However, what the Labor government have done to kind of capture taxes based upon the indexation method not being as strong, a minimum floor of 30% tax after the indexation method's taken into account. So regardless of your profit that you've made, they're going to take 30% tax, and that's for people which are on lower incomes that decide that, I'm going to sell, I'm going to take time off work and try to reduce my tax so it's below 30%. That's not going to be the case. You'll be paying tax at 30%. But again, answering the question, the capital gain tax calculation, if you've held it before budget night, is split into two calculations. One being a 50% discount method from ownership to the 1st of July 2027 valuation. Second calculation is the indexation method from July 27 onwards, and you potentially could pay no tax under the indexation method if it hasn't realised a gain.
Mate, now this one, Kush, whilst that was brilliant, Jeremy, thank you very much for the detail. I think we're talking a lot more detail now, and this is something that we're going to have to go into on probably more of a personal level as well, man. But I actually wanted to throw to one that I've got here from for Simon rather, which I think this is probably one that's just the burning question on a lot of people's lips, which is essentially, is it still possible for someone building or already holding a portfolio? Is $2,000 a week passive income still achievable in 10 to 15 years? And how do you protect the equity you've already built along the way?
The answer to that question is who knows, right? Like, I mean, it looks like the world's changing as of yesterday. The world was different 6 months ago. The world was different 12 months ago. When I was building my portfolio, I went through high interest rates, low interest rates, COVID, good economies, bad economies. Like at the end of the day, you can't predict the future. Like I subscribe to the saying, make hay while the sun shines. Like we all need, like, to achieve passive income, you need to consistently buy, you need to consistently build your portfolio sustainably. And, sometimes some years when the sun's shining, you want to buy 3 or 4 or 5 properties, right? But sometimes if you're a little bit strapped for cash flow, or if the world's a little bit shaky, or your personal situation, you're going through something, then you just got to pause. I think long term, at the end of the day, I mean, we've got plenty of examples of people, at least in the past 12 months, that have been accumulating these properties. Look, I wouldn't say average, maybe slightly above average income earners, buying 12 properties over the course of the year. I don't know, to be honest, if that's still going to be possible moving forward. But all I do know is, for the past 10 to 20 years, the fundamentals of what we buy and where we buy has never, ever changed. And the overarching thing is to keep getting these bargains that we keep talking about. So as long as you keep doing that, if you've got the cash flow, and by the way, I said this before, I think cash flow is the negative cash flow. If you're buying in the right areas, is going to be a very temporary thing, just with rising rents and so on, that is almost certain now. You should find yourself in a much better cash flow position 12 months down the track, in which case, you might be able to pull out more equity or get more loans to buy more properties. In terms of protecting your current equity, I think, I'm not entirely sure what you mean, but what you mean by that. But if you don't have to sell, you shouldn't sell. And now there's even less incentive to get rid of houses. You've got more incentive to keep them. So just hang on, I think.
Like you're saying, the fundamentals aren't changing. This isn't the first time we've had a shake-up. I mean, this literally happened in the what was it, mid-'80s, 85, I think. Negative gearing got taken away, then it got reinstated. We had APRA change everything from 2017 to 2019, round 1, round 2, round 3. Like, we've seen shake-ups before, and the market might move a little bit, which is why I wanted to actually throw to this one here. I think this is from Anthony. I'll just chuck this one on the screen. There's a YouTube comment as well. And again, keep your comments coming, guys. Are we expecting property prices to slow down? It seems like the incentives to invest in property has reduced. Kind of goes a little bit counter to what you're just saying here, Simon, because like the incentives, actually not counter. So let me reword that. It's more so that the incentives longer term, realistically, they're still here. But that short-term sort of sugar hit, or that short-term kind of taxation incentive in your personal name, that may have changed. But if we can look in that to that core of the question of, are we expecting prices to slow? Who wants to jump into that one?
I think in certain areas they definitely will slow, and in certain areas they'll definitely go backwards. But like everyone has kind of mentioned already multiple times, the underlying problem is still not addressed. We have a huge housing shortage. We've got tons of people that need houses. We've got build costs that are still going up. It's almost as if like, oh, okay, cool, first time buyer. I'm a first time buyer now. I can go off and build a $2 million house, in Sydney tomorrow, instead of buying something existing like that. It doesn't work like that. So you have to be very particular in what markets you play in. And like I keep saying, I think these sort of ultimately where migration or mass migration is happening is the safest place, and probably the most logical place to keep buying. Keep one eye on cash flow. If you are in a bad situation, or if you are slightly negative or hugely negative, then obviously have a bit of a buffer in place. I'm a big advocate for that, whether it's a cash buffer or whether it's a bit of equity sitting in a property. Like, just make sure you've got an out, a bit of an exit. I think that goes for whether we're going through good times or bad times. But in my opinion, this is like, there's going to be huge opportunities almost immediately. Especially in some of these sort of affordable housing major capital city markets.
Be calculative and be deliberate. They're the two best words that you can take from today: calculative and deliberate, in the way that you buy something, in the way that you strategize on the way in and on the way out.
I can just hear those words coming out of your dad's mouth, Jeremy. That sounds very much like
those are the words he used.
Iannuzzelli.
The words he used this morning. He did a budget presentation for all the staff today, and he closed with, as accountants, our role is to be calculative and be deliberate and decisive with our words, and as investors, be deliberate and calculative. And that way you are strategizing what market you're getting into at what times, and what structure you're going to use, and what's your business plan for that property. That becomes important. You no longer can just buy something for the sake of buying it. There's got to be a little bit of a business plan for this investment, which is most likely the largest investments people make in their life.
definitely not the time to be speculative. Like, don't chase the new mine opening. Don't chase the big, development project that's happening in the middle of Broken Hill or something.
Broken Hill is so lovely.
Is it?
No, I shouldn't have said that. Let's cut to a question. Daniel, do these changes now? I'm actually going to throw to a few questions that, because this has already been going for an hour and a bit, I don't know who's been joining, who's jumped in, who's jumped out. So there's going to be a few that we might sort of just very quickly retouch on and visit. I want to make sure all of you guys are getting as much value out of this as possible. So Daniel, do these changes regarding CGT apply to properties within SMSFs, Jeremy?
No, not from the budget.
That was a very quick answer. Okay.
There's so many great questions I've seen, so we'll help people fly through it.
Absolutely. So as far as this one here, what do we got from Yomes? Will these changes increase the prices of established homes? Simon, Morgan, Jeremy?
I think they absolutely will. Like I said, in these sort of bread and butter areas, I think it's inevitable. There's just going to be less supply. The demand's still there. In fact, the demand's probably growing, but there's just going to be less people wanting to sell or incentivized to sell. Absolutely, 100%.
That's a good comment from people like us, right? Who know and are in tune with the market. But for 80% of the people that are out there that get consumed by that, what's it called? The equation, whatever that they use in the meta space. What's the word for it, Todd? The algorithm. When people are getting consumed by the algorithm, they're going to be bombarded with the best of the best marketing, right? Mm-hmm. So I think your sentiment will be still a little bit low for a while people go through their capitulation phase, and then they realize the world's actually going to become, sun comes up, goes down at night, and people still coming in and houses still need to be built and used. But once people realize that after 3 to 6 months, that's when we'll start to see a rebound. It is a Coke bottle at the moment. It has been shook, and it's going to continue to get shaken. And when it pops, we're going to see the biggest run on property, probably bigger than we've ever seen before. And it's what happened in 85, and it's why they took it away in 87.
I want more arm movements from you, Jeremy. This passion, mate. This is what I'm after. Like, I want to throw to a question here because, and I'm interested on everyone's opinion on this. This one's actually from Victoria Williams. Do you think first home buyers will be nervous about buying unrenovated houses because building costs will go up, making it easier to buy unrenovated properties for investors? Now, Simon, I already know your stance on renovation projects. Everyone's a little bit different on this one, but this is something that personally I actually saw in Ballarat probably about 6 weeks ago. We made a Ballarat Opens episode. Everything that was renovated, flying off the shelf, still heaps of demand on it. As soon as it was unrenovated, people just weren't as interested. That gap between unrenovated and renovated, I feel, is going to widen again. I'm very interested to hear everyone's take on this one. Who wants to jump in with that first?
Yeah. Is Adrian Patelli still buying properties on the block?
I think he's making his own block now.
Okay. Well then,
I think they stopped him from buying them.
He was still buying properties. I'll renovate whatever he wants to buy. I can tell you that.
He's the best buyer.
Sorry.
Morgan, did you have something you want to jump in with that, mate?
Yeah, I mean, like my kind of philosophy on renovating has kind of changed a bit. Like I used to kind of stick to that when I was at the beginning stage of my portfolio, and I kind of had no option to. So it was a bit different, but I actually kind of subscribe to what Simon kind of talks about, which is just buying good, solid houses where you can rent it out straight away. It doesn't require any work. Or if it does, like anything that's just cosmetic, nothing structural. Because like if you're going to be renovating something, there is a very good chance, especially if it's a big reno, that things could go wrong. So you can do all the best planning in the world, but who knows, maybe there's like, I don't know, electricity wires on the roof that have to get removed, or I don't know, like something's just not there that you or the builder can't see until they look under whatever it is that they're looking under. So I think it's just better to stick to the good fundamentals. And if it's a property you're going to live in and you're kind of like emotionally married to it, then that might be a different story. But I think from an investing perspective, I always come back to the path of least resistance. So just buying something that's got good fundamentals. You don't have to add too much value to it, if anything, just a lick of paint or something like that, and then get a tenant in straight away.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, if you think the cost of renovating is high, try building a brand new property. That's even higher, which is what all these government changes are trying to push first-home buyers to do, which I still don't understand how that's going to happen, because most first-home buyers I know are limited by a finite budget. But yeah, look, I mean, if you're buying a house to live in, I think renovating makes complete sense. You got to be comfortable, but you don't have to do it all in one whack. You can do it over time, and you can just make small improvements along the way. My stance for investment properties is always the same. When you buy a property and you renovate it, it's a massive waste of time, a massive waste of capital. Personally, I'm terrible at it. I can't even hammer a bloody nail, let alone do a renovation. It'll take me like 8 months to do a renovation that a tradie might take 3 days to do. But it's a waste of capital. That capital can be deployed into other investments. It can even just sit in your offset account, especially in these times where you probably need a little bit more cash flow anyway. Just buy it, clean, safe and tidy, rent it out, fix up what you have to over time. And then when you sell it, do the big fancy reno to hopefully attract some emotional buyers that might be willing to pay a lot for it. Because if you renovate and stick tenants in, they're gonna stuff it up. Your brand new walls are going to be scratched, your carpet's going to be scuffed, you're going to have to redo it in 10 years anyway. So all for what? An extra $50 in rent? I just don't think it's worth it personally.
Now, I'm going to throw to another question here. So this one's in from, I'm just going to go Radar. Now, I've actually been getting in trouble for swearing on the podcast recently by comments and by my mum. So I'm just going to read this slightly differently. This one really annoys me, that all the assets are affected. How does buying shares or growing your business for an eventual sale got anything to do with the first young home buyers? So I'm essentially, what they're saying here, Jeremy, I think this is more so one for you, is if they're changing capital gains tax, realistically, this has been changed across the board. This isn't just changing for people that are buying property, correct?
Correct.
Would you mind jumping into a little bit more over, like, sort of quick detail around what's that looking for, or looking like rather, across all assets?
That is a disaster. That's the only thing I can say. They haven't factored in what the indexation method did during that time when Keating brought it in, and the level and reduction of productivity during the 90s. If you sell your business and you sell the shares in your business, often people issue shares when they start a business at $1. They might buy 100 shares. They might sell it to somebody else. They might sell their business for 400 grand, the shares of it. You would normally get a 50% discount, meaning you would only pay tax on $200,000 of the $400,000 sale. Now you've got an indexing method. CPI indexing on $1 per share is peanuts. And that's going to absolutely kill the ability for people to then on-sell their business for someone else to buy it and take it to a new level. They just haven't understood why Howard and Costello, the dynamic duo, the two best people that ran the country economically and fundamentally for growth during that period of time they were in government, they didn't understand why they took it away. And we will understand what that looks like, because productivity will slow again. And I understand why they want to try to do it to slow down the property market. It probably won't happen, but there are so many implications from a shares perspective where the indexation method just falls apart. So again, I do think that's going to be lobbied quite heavily once people actually understand what the real numbers are behind the indexation method and how it works to things like selling the shares of your own business. In the 90s, no one started businesses. No one bought businesses. There was nothing that we were doing which was advancing our economy or our country. And from 2000, we had the best 26 years of economic prosperity, yes, driven by mining, but also driven by entrepreneurship. Give people the tax break and you'll often find things become better. If you tax tobacco like they've done significantly through the roof, we're collecting $13 billion in 2021. We're now collecting $3 billion a year from tobacco excise because they want to tax it to the hilt people then will start vaping and they'll start buying illegal cigarettes. If you tax things too much, people lose motivation and drive to do inventive and creative things.
It's so true. I'm not proud of this, but one of the reasons I quit smoking was because the last packet I bought was $50. I was like, I don't want to do that anymore. That's ridiculous. It worked on me. Anyway, next
You're
one.
not supposed to be paying. You're not supposed to be paying $50 for ciggies anymore, apparently.
Anyway, that's a long time ago now, but I got another one here. This is probably a bit more of a Jeremy question as well. A house bought 5 years ago, currently PPOR. If you move out and put it into the rental market, can you negatively gear? Great question, Sam.
At present, the dialogue says that you can, because they talk about that you owned the property prior to 7:30 p.m. the budget night. So at present, how I read it and interpret it, the answer is yes, you can. But I would definitely stress to say that you should be reviewing that, because it could be something little silly that they bring in, and as they really define what the legislation is when it goes through the lower house and then through the upper house. We've got to remember, everyone, it will be debated lower and upper. There will be compromises. Deals get done all the time in the upper house. Pauline's blocked a lot of things. The Greens have blocked a lot of things. The Independents block a lot of things. And that's where compromises happen. And it does. Deals are done. They always say deals are done in the upper house of the federal government.
Sorry, man. I'm just going back here. I just saw a question pop up that I didn't do. So someone's jumped in, whoever that was. If you know how to do that again, go for it. I'm happy to answer your question, but I don't know how the hell that popped up on screen. Can you see that, Bianca? Okay. Anyway, sorry, Jeremy. That just distracted me a little bit there, mate. Let's go here. All right, let's jump in another one. I'm just going to open up another question. I'm just looking for the one that just popped up, but I can't actually see where that one came from. 2 secs, guys. Does anyone else know how to beatbox? Yeah, here it is. Okay, cool. Okay, this one's come in from I think this is Kelvin. With 30% minimum tax on family trusts, can I pay admin fee / management fee to a lower income spouse? Oh wow, you're getting creative, mate. I can see where this is going. Beneficiaries, adult kids, instead of income distribution.
There needs to be a commercial nexus, Kelvin, which means a connection to you paying them a wage, an admin fee or management fee is a wage. That's how we pay people from corporate entities. If there is no commercial nexus connection to that, then you are Part 4A tax avoiding, and you'll just add to the coffers of Jim Chalmers' bank account that he needs to continue spending habits.
Tax minimization and tax avoiding are two very different things. So if we're going down the tax avoidance path, we want to make sure that we're just not doing that. Really, let's keep it as minimizing things. I wanted to throw to another one here. We got Simon. Sorry, I'm actually just reading through a few of the comments that I probably shouldn't. One was about I can't even read any of this out. Guessing tested voter. You guys seeing anything that you want to jump into here, Morgan or Jeremy as well? Here we go. Whoever's doing that on the team, there's a few people. Yeah, can you keep doing it? I think this is better if someone else takes this over. I think I'm spinning too many plates here. Here we go, guys. So why is Jim Chalmers the treasurer and not Jeremy? Well, Jeremy, I think that one's got to be for you, mate.
You can share with everyone my ambitions, because I've shared with you it many, many times. What's my ambitions over the next 10 years?
Your ambitions is to get into politics. We haven't actually talked about exactly what kind of a seat that you're going for, mate, but I would assume, just knowing your personality for quite a while now, you're probably gunning for the top seat, mate, PM.
I'd love to do it. I think we need a businessman in there. We need someone who actually understands economics, not career parasites.
Absolutely. Now, if you want to vote for Jeremy,
no excessive uses of here. Anything gets announced.
I won't be saying I can tell you that in any Senate inquiry. I'll take that on notice. I'll either know the answer or I don't. I can't stand the games play.
Yeah, here.
Yeah.
It was both cute and slightly annoying yesterday watching the last end of the budget, and Fred was sitting there watching it, and he's only just learned how to clap, and they all started clapping him, and then Fred started clapping. I'm like, don't you clap that guy? He's just taking away your money, mate. But anyway, mate, I did want to throw to a few more. So if you guys have got a couple more questions locked and loaded, but otherwise I think we're about to actually run out of time. So if there's a question that you guys have got that you're wanting quickly thrown in as a bit of a rapid fire, make sure you're chucking it in the comments below and we'll try and get to as many quick ones as we can. But Bianca or Jen in the background, if there's anything else that you guys want to pop on screen just as we're waiting for it, you can chuck one up here.
I'm just reading the crypto comments.
Crypto's going to get absolutely smacked because you can't use something that swings so up and so down and then have an indexation method to it, because a lot of people, no one's got a vision, I'm going to hold crypto for the next 40 years. Some do, and it goes to the moon, then comes back down and goes back to the core of the earth. But those people wanting to utilize and invest in crypto for a couple of years, indexation method is going to kill them. I just don't think, and because it's been gone for 26 years, people actually don't understand the implications of what the tax does in the indexation method. So hence I've said, the next two structures that will widely be used, we've heard about trust. They've been around for hundreds of thousands of years in different methods and different shapes and forms. But companies and super funds, they're going to be probably two of the most common structures. And I know I'm going to quite heavily focus on my super personally with non-concessional contributions, something I wasn't looking to do till later on. But I just don't want to pay any more tax. I think we're just getting taxed to the hilt with auxiliary taxes, not just normal income tax, but auxiliary taxes.
Love it, man. And there's another one here, Jeremy. If property sold at capital loss, what will be happening to carried forward losses of negative gearing? I think this comes back to a little bit of what we were talking about at the very start.
Small, medium business accountants. I might charge hourly for this one, but the capital loss will be carried forward as well as the negative gearing loss that you've accumulated. So if you've bought a property, you've made a loss on it, you sold it for less than what you bought it for, that capital loss is carried forward. Nothing changes with that rule. And if there is revenue losses you've generated with this new legislation they're looking to put through, those revenue losses from the property will also be carried forward, and they can be utilized against the future rental income of the property. And we all know that capital losses can only be utilized against capital gains. So nothing changes from that, just the addition of the revenue losses from rental properties, similar to the carry forward revenue losses when you have a sole trader loss in your personal tax return. Those losses, there's certain rules for you to utilize those losses against your wages, taxable income, and there's rules there where you've got to defer it, and they can be utilized at a later date when you make a business sole trader income. So it's going to be quite consistent with rules that are already there. I'll put the invoice in the mail.
Hope that's answered your question, guys. And we've got a few more coming in as comments, but most of this, here we go. Can we give Jeremy some rest, please? He's been, okay. I think it's time for all of us to jump off of this live shortly anyway, but especially Jeremy, mate. This has been fantastic for market insights from yourself, Simon. Realistically, keep buying, making sure that we're buying in solid locations where there's always going to be demand, making sure that you're buying in a price point that's got some real affordability around it. The blue chip side of things is nothing that you've ever really gotten behind and spruiked before. And it doesn't surprise me that you're still backing the exact same horse, because there's been changes in government, there's been changes in policy, there's been wars, there's been everything that's happened beforehand. And it's still about moving forward with those same fundamentals. Morgan, if I've understood everything that you've put forward, mate, it's really around, has borrowing power dropped? Unfortunately, yes. Has it dropped like completely and it's just dead? No. But has it gotten more expensive if you want to build a portfolio to that larger scale, to going into the 4, 5, 6, 7? Yes, you're going to be looking at more third tier lenders. Realistically, correct me if I'm wrong, I think you were kind of always looking at third tier lenders in a lot of cases when you really wanted to scale. Maybe not every single time. It depends on your income. And this is the big thing as well. It's always going to depend on your personal situation, which, segueing over to Jeremy, realistically buying that first property, if you're a newbie investor, in your personal name still has weight to it, even though you might not get the negative gearing concession from it, again, depending on exactly when we're talking about here for the next 12 months, whatever it is. But there's still going to be company costs, trust costs. There's that ongoing structural maintenance, I'm going to say, that you need to actually be putting into, which is a few $1,000s a year as a first-time investor. So keeping it nice and easy in your personal name, but then sort of combining you guys together a little bit here, Jeremy and Morgan, the structural side of things as far as borrowing power, that by the sounds of things hasn't really changed. If you're buying in a company, buying in a trust, it's probably going to be pretty similar to what it was before, if not exactly the same. Again, we're still, as much as I'm calling you every day, Morgan, we still don't know what's actually happening just yet as far as what the banks are going to change policy-wise. And Jeremy, you're talking about the company potentially really being the structure to buy in moving forward if someone is going to use structure, if that is the right fit for them. SMSFs and companies are going to be the potential winners moving forward out of this from several different perspectives. But the big caveat around this as well, if you guys weren't listening a little bit earlier on, was around right now, land tax, pretty good. If you're buying, especially in New South Wales, I think the one that you gave as an example, 1,075,000 was the land tax threshold. But then if all of a sudden companies become the main structure that everyone holds in, get ready, because then that will potentially change in 2 years, 10 years, 5, like who knows? But it's always about pivoting, moving with the market and doing everything that we can. And that's what this live was about. And thank you so much for everyone, all of you guys for jumping onto this, everyone that's been listening to this as well. Keep your questions coming with this as well, because Jez, I know all of you guys have got your own YouTube channels, I'm pretty sure as well. I'm sure you'll be happy to jump into the comments wherever you can. But I do want to say though, they're all going to be ridiculously busy. I know how much you've got, especially you, Jeremy. I'm sure you've probably got 86 emails just since this live has started, mate. So if there are other questions that you've got, put them into the comments. I'll be jumping into as many as I can, and I'm sure the guys will as well. But if I take everyone one by one, are there any final words of wisdom, Simon, that you want to leave everyone with tonight, mate?
First of all, I'm pretty sure Jeremy is AI. You know, some of the stuff that rolled off his mouth. I'm lost. Like when Todd's asking a question about some thing, one of those things that Jeremy answered, I was like lost 30 seconds in, and then Jeremy's just like boom, 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 boom. You know, we got Jeremy chat. But no, look, guys, I think a lot of this stuff is going to be changed. Like straight up, I can't see this as being sustainable. Don't make stupid decisions based on it. Don't start hunting for house and land packages and new builds. Stick to what works. Stick to where people actually need to live. That's the bottom line. When I'm old and grey, I want my passive income coming from, you know, houses in big cities where if they go vacant, there's a line of people waiting to rent again, you know, like not in bloody whoop whoop, not brand new properties that I overpay for. Like, yeah, that's always the bottom line. It always has been, and nothing the government changes will ever change that either. But arm yourselves with people like Jeremy and Morgan, because they can do things that I can't. They can do things that nobody can. The advice they give, is just incredible. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Simon. Morgan, anything else that you wanted to wrap things up with, mate?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think some of these changes, like Jeremy very much mentioned, the Coke bottle has definitely been shaked. But I think when we kind of zoom out and look at things over time, I think it's just really important to just stick to good investing fundamentals, like cash flow, buying well in good areas. And at least from my side, like, buy properties that you can actually afford and not the kind that are going to put you in a worse off position. And if you are going to put yourself in that position, like, develop a plan with your team, people like the guys in this call here, to figure out, like, is it worth it? What can we do to maybe improve that? So then it actually does work out to be a good scenario. So that's my kind of parting words for this.
Love it, man. Jeremy, what do you want to say to take us out, or do we need to reboot your AI? Have we ran out of credits?
No, look, I think Simon and Morgan have been brilliant with their summaries, and I wouldn't change a word they've both said. I think it's they're looking at it from a helicopter view, and it's spot on. So I'm going to kudos to Morgan and Simon and say spot on.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, guys. And if you guys are still in the live stream now, if you've enjoyed this as well, if you could hit that like button, that would be amazing help for us. Otherwise, I'm going to end the stream here. Thank you so much. Keep investing, keep moving forward safely, and make sure that you surrounded yourself with your expert team to keep smashing that goal. Thank you so much, guys.
Thanks, guys.
See ya.
What button do I push?
I think you're still alive.
I am.